Okay, we're now recording, so I hope that's okay with everyone. If that's not okay, please go ahead and drop off if you don't agree to the recording of this. Hi, everyone. Let me just do this. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for joining our speaker series, COVID-19 and long-term impact, its long-term impact to work and learning. Today, I will be facilitating a discussion. So this is really informal, and it's really to get some conversation and thoughts going on the impact of remote working on work practices and work in general. And you know, this is a really wide topic, so we're just touching the surface. So remote working went from something that was only a few companies, high-tech companies did with employees, a limited number of employees doing remote working, to something that became a main mode of working, especially for knowledge workers overnight after the pandemic hit, and this happened really globally. In a matter of a few weeks, a number of companies announced that they see they're giving the option of remote working to their employees even past pandemic, and many of the employers are really welcoming that. The conversation today is really from the perspective of the company, not so much the employee, because there are really different stakeholders and different personas, if you would, that are impacted in this. But inviting everyone to think from the company's point of view. So the two reasons that remote working has been adopted by this slew of not only high tech, but really seeping into other industries are really two reasons. One is efficiency, and the other one is productivity, when you really look under the hood. On the efficiency side, basically there was a study done in April that 74% of CFOs intend to go beyond COVID-19 crisis to remote working for their employees. And, you know, whenever there is a huge trend driven by CFO decisions, that's always a flag for me. So the other one, actually, on the efficiency side and cost reduction side, you know, some companies are actually talking about pay cuts as a result of move to remote working. You know, Facebook is just one example of that. On the productivity side, actually, I came across this research from Rescue Time, and I've got all the URLs there, which there is now data that basically knowledge workers are more productive when working remotely. So I think there's enough data to say that productivity and efficiency really improve significantly when we adopt remote working en masse. But my question is, what about innovation? Will remote working lead to more innovation? Will it lead to less innovation? Or it will have no impact on innovation? And, I'd like to open it up and really hear from everyone. I think we have enough time to hear from everyone what you think on these three questions. I'll just call based on, and if you don't want to pass, just say pass. You don't have to answer this. I see Scott is next. So Scott, do you want to?
Sure, great, thanks. I'm speaking a little bit on behalf of World University and School, but also in teaching a course on information technology and society online as well. And I see the potential for comparison with other companies in these regards. And with regard to more innovation, I see Google as a great example, which is scaled to about 114,000 employees as of 6 months to a year ago, and seems to have a culture which supports work at home. I think Google employees have been selected for in such a way that they are potentially good in working at home. That, by way of comparison, is yes to more innovation, and Google is an example of a more innovation company. Less innovation, I put a quote from about when Yahoo asked all its employees to come into the office. I think it was February 2013. And I was wondering about that back then. What was going on? Were Yahoo employees not doing as much work at home as they might do in the office? And this quote puts this in a positive context. And one question from sort of an employer perspective in innovation is, how can one engage employees working from home? But there are many, this quote suggests that there's much innovation that comes from hallway discussions and cafeteria discussions and meeting new people and impromptu team meetings. So one might think one would lose innovation by working at home in these regards. But on the other hand, one might cultivate these impromptu discussions innovatively in Zoom and in other group video conferencing. To the third question, I think there will be an impact on innovation, and it will be companies that partly define that, but also I think the actual, let's call it, revolution that's occurred from information technology itself could potentially facilitate innovation, and with workers in companies as well. And opportunities for workers to be creative in new ways because they're working at home and not in the office, for example. So
excellent. Thanks, Scott. I see Sunil is next on my list. So Sunil, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think this is going to be a topic that's going to be debated for a while, right? Which is, I suspect coming out of COVID, we'll certainly find a lot more people working remotely, but I think we'll also find a lot more people in hybrid models, whether it's 1 or 2 days in the week in the office and the other 3 days remote, what have you, right? So I actually think there's an opportunity here to accelerate innovation, right? Because to the points made earlier, Zoom and what have you will create new ways to innovate, but you'll never substitute the proverbial water cooler conversation. I just think what will happen is you'll just have it at different points in time. So I think we're going to see lots more innovation happen once everybody settles into a new normal. right? And I think there's going to be lots of examples. To the point of Yahoo, I do remember reading some of the articles at the time. Yahoo did something interesting when they asked people to come in. And in fact, they went as far as to terminate some folks that were in locations where they did not have, an office. But what they were doing was actually looking at VPN connectivity times down to the individual, right? Which seemed pretty intense. They were, I can't remember the lady that was the CEO at the time, whose name escapes me right now, but I remember reading an article and listening to it. Marissa Meyer, thank you. Yes, she had said, look, we didn't take this lightly. We want to be a virtual company, but we found that the level of people of abuse, if you will, to the privilege was way off the chart. So they chose to swing the pendulum completely the other way. Right, but I just think this is going to be a new normal, and I actually think it's going to help. We can, there's lots of industries that we're seeing evidence of that.
Excellent. Jim is next on my list.
Hey, Yassi.
Yeah, you want me to give you a brief description of what we're doing?
Yeah, I was going to pass because I joined late, so I don't have any context.
Okay. So the context is, we know there's enough data that working remotely leads to more efficiency and productivity. And therefore, lots of companies are really encouraging remote working, and they see their employees working past the pandemic is over. So the question that I have posed, what will we see relative to innovation? If we're adopting remote working, will we see more innovation or less innovation, or will have no impact on innovation? And you can still pass if you like.
No, I'll try to say something. So I'll put it in the chat, but I think it's totally contextual. I think if you have young children at home, then I believe, and your children don't have daycare, so you've got to take care of young children. It's totally disruptive to work from home. If you are, if you don't have young children, or if you had other service providers taking care of your dependents so you could focus on work, and you no longer have those because you're working at home, then I think your productivity is going to plummet. I do think, though, if you're working from home and it's just, and you can stay focused on work, then yeah, I agree with the studies that show increased productivity. But it's very contextual. I think one could come up with a more nuanced way of looking at it, but I think through most of human history, people didn't travel far from their homes every day. They did their work on their farm, they did their work in their shop. So I think, in many ways, it would be good to get back to a productive local production, local work. I think there's a lot of reasons why it would be a good thing. But I do think it's entirely contextual, and I think it really comes down to the other services and the service system that are available to take care of your dependents.
That's great. Thanks, Jim. And also, as Jim said, it'd be great if you put your answers in the chat as well, because it will make it a lot easier to do a point of view paper on this, because that's what we intend to do. So the next one is Larry. Larry, would you like to say a few words? I think Larry's on mute. We'll go to Enrique and then we'll go back to Larry.
Yes, I guess I'm going to speak personally from what I see happening with my employer, which is Intel. In fact, I would say innovation will happen out of necessity, precisely because of the change in work modes, right? From basically site-based to home-based. And so, as you're aware, I'm not a bystander, because I've been essentially, I guess, participating in enabling remote engineering essentially for platform development, remote access to labs. So that doesn't address everything. I think, as mentioned before, Intel is moving more into a hybrid model, right, where some employees are classified as, well, as essential, right, and they need to rely still on going to a site. That is true, for instance, for most of the manufacturing jobs. On the other hand, quite a large segment of engineering is now done being remotely, including actually some of the work that was supposed to be done in front of a bench.
Mm.
Now, less innovation, yes or no, because I would say the water cooler still plays a role, right, in creativity, and that part, I guess, will be missed. And then the long-term impact, I would say, depends less on the circumstances and more on these particular policies and makeup, right? So of the of the corporations involved, and so corporations where executives are trying actively to be innovative, right, within the constraints of COVID-19, I think will do well. The ones that look at this as an issue, as a problem, may not do as well, and so your mileage will vary.
Mm. Great, thanks, Enrique. Nate is next on my list.
Hi, Yassi and everybody. So I agree with everything that was said in front of me. I was thinking the answer is it depends. But I'll say from my something new I'll try to add, again, my own perspective. I feel like given all the ideal conditions, it will lead to more innovations, more likely to lead to more innovation than certainly less. I think in my experience, recent work experience, we moved from the cubicle world to the open concept, open office, collaborative workspace as the norm, which is what I've experienced. It was harder for me to innovate in the open environment if that was what I was forced to use. In other words, I needed to do a fair amount of innovation in my own work area, but whenever I needed to do that in the office, I went and hid someplace, right? Block my calendar and go hide in a conference room somewhere where people aren't going to bump into me, because I need to build my own tacit knowledge and research and read and think and maybe whiteboard, independent work. But I also feel strongly that innovation also does definitely require collaboration with others as well. So I'd say as long as people are supported with childcare and things, as Jim mentioned, clearly is critical. And as long as companies, like my own company is not Blue Cross Blue Shield, not an incredibly tech savvy company, as long as companies like mine, which are not high tech companies, can build the IT infrastructure to enable better and effective digital collaboration, then it'll lead to more innovation, because, and I'm speaking for myself again, it's easier for me to hide in my own dining room or living room, right, than to find a conference room and kind of avoid people in the office if I need to really think.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say more likely more than less.
Excellent. Manoj, go ahead, please.
Yeah, hi, Yashi and everyone. So it's an interesting discussion. So I think there are several ways we can look at it. In my own situation, I can see that a lot of innovation already happening. Things which we just a few weeks ago we thought impossible are happening. In a services organization, we never thought we would be working from home, in fact. But here we are working 110%, giving our productivity. So I believe few areas like business model innovation. So the way companies are doing business is going to change, and we already see that happening. The way we communicate, so that acceleration has happened with this, forced remote work environment. I see that more and more innovation is happening the way we collaborate remotely. Overall, I think to answer to the question whether it's going to be more innovation or less, I believe it's going to be a mixed bag. And as we learn more working remotely, we will discover more opportunities. And I just want to quote one example here. I was reading an article. There's a small company based out of Bangalore here in India, and they have started experimenting having these remote, 5 to 10 people offices, really remote locations, maybe in a village somewhere, and they're experimenting, delivering, a product, a digital product. While having these 5 to 10 people in each small locations, and then they have established all the tools and ways to communicate. And these remote offices basically are in village environment, and we all know that the natural environment brings in more creativity and possibly results in more innovation. So experiments like these, I think, will continue to happen, and we'll see down the line once the new normal emerges, and then we'll see a lot more innovation happening. So overall, I would say it would have a positive impact. Just one last point I want to bring here is that there's one thing which makes us human, is that the face-to-face conversation, that something which we may not be able to replace. So I believe that kind of a hybrid model is going to help us going forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Manoj. Larry, can you get off mute? Oh, yeah, I see. Okay, go ahead.
I think I fixed it. Sorry, Bluetooth issues. I'm really interested in this as an organizational psychologist. I've been following this, and there's been a lot in the tech kinds of newsletters like CNET and that kind of thing, but there's also been a lot of opinion around this and talking about this in the HR community, the human resources community, about what is going to happen when we do get post-COVID, or we get it into such control that it's only a minor type infection, not this major and so virulent. Anyway, are we going to get post-COVID soon, or what? There's been, and we've seen it in in the U.S. in the mask wearing kinds of things, and so initially there was a lot of compliance with on the part of the people on doing this and then engaging in work from home. Then there was recently some pushback, I would say, since end of May, a lot of pushback on that. The reason I mention that is because it's two sides to this. It's the people, the workers, the contributors, and then there's the companies and management and such, and how comfortable they are in doing this, and what they foresee as their post-COVID role. Do they go back to work in an office most of the time, if not full-time, or do they shift that to mostly at home with some going into the office? In terms of innovation, it can lead, I think, to more innovation, as other people have said here, with the right technologies, getting the right people together, and giving opportunities for what would have been a hallway discussion or stop by my cubicle or desk or whatever kind of discussion or coffee room discussion, allowing for opportunities rather than meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting with a certain schedule and these certain people in it, and going from beginning to end of day, and then working with customers otherwise. There needs to be that environment. So it could lead to less. If we do get segmented like that and we get too hybrid with the model, people aren't going to know how to connect with the right people if they want to discuss this. And so we'll be relying more on technology tools to do that. I don't think it's going to have no impact. I think it's either going to be more or it's going to be less. As everyone else has said, it's going to really depend on the situation.
Okay, excellent. Okay, I'm mindful of time. Sorry, Larry. Rick, you're next. I'm wonderful to see you here, Rick.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, I had worked for IBM for a number of years, and I'm now retired, and I had both the opportunity to work in an office as well as remotely, probably 2/3, 1/3 of my time spent in those relative positions. I think that number one, people are flexible, and I think the infrastructure is going to see a lot of innovation. We're going to see a lot of people adjusting to doing this. But the big concern I have is, if I look back to my days of designing microprocessors, it's a little bit more challenging when you can't walk down the hall and ask somebody a question. I mean, Jim raises a good point in terms of distractions at the home. It doesn't have to be just the kids. It can be the doorbell ringing, the phone ringing, and if you're there by yourself and you're dealing with both work and those distractions, it can be a bit of a challenge. So again, from an infrastructure point of view, I think we're going to see a lot of innovation. From a development point of view, as someone mentioned earlier, it depends. It really depends upon the kind of development that you're trying to do. So in some cases, it's going to be less. In some cases, it's going to be more. In some places, it will be no impact at all.
Excellent, thanks. Ralph, you're next.
Well, I think it's, at least from where I sit, the impact will be no impact, because long before the coronavirus, most of us in academia are working remotely with colleagues all over the world, and easily 90% of our work is done via Zoom, email, exchanging documents, and so on. In fact, when I do go to the office, usually I sit in the office by myself all day. And if there's somebody down the hall I need to ask a question of, I send them an email. So we've been doing this for a long, long time now, and we're perfectly comfortable with it. And I think as far as the distractions at home are concerned, assuming we emerge from this pandemic, then people who used to go to the office by sending their kids to daycare or having in-home care for elderly relatives or whatever, can do the very same thing when they're working out of the house. Still send the kids to daycare and make whatever arrangements are necessary for others. And because it's so new, yes, there are distractions now, like the doorbell ringing, but once we work at home more or less full time, I think everybody's going to develop some kind of a home office environment that is satisfactory. So I don't see this as a big hurdle.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thanks, Ralph. And last but not least, Robert.
Hello, my name is Robert Harmon, professor, also consultant. And one of the things that I've had a lot of experience doing online learning with classes all the way from service innovation classes, analytics, that type of thing. Very good environment to keep track of students, that's for sure. What are they doing? You get their times, what they've added, that kind of stuff. And periodically you get some good ideas back from them. But you know, that's more of a control environment from the professor's part. As a consultant, I think I've mostly always worked remotely, and usually the means of contact were the telephone, you know, for conference calls and stuff like that. Probably the last few years, video was involved. But and working on the book with Enrique, we saw each other periodically, but most of the hard work was done remotely and individually, right? And then we would share it back and forth. And I find that in my consulting practice as well. In terms of innovation, the ability to share ideas remotely, to converse, have the video calls and that type of thing, is really good at let's not keep an idea to myself, and the next time I go see the consultant bring it up, we've already brought it up, you've had time to think, you have the group intelligence coming in and stuff like that. And I've seen that particularly in several of the projects I've done recently, that it's really helped speed the project, to get to the point where the decisions were quite clear that needed to be made, and start on execution. So I see ways that this does help innovation. I worked on many product and software development projects that have gone so far that you end up with a dead end, you got to start over. And I think having this kind of collaboration type of environment gets to those kind of points, root cause analysis and stuff like that, more quickly. So I think it does help. I appreciate particularly what Ralph had to say in terms of how this has affected his environment, because I pretty much live the same way. So anyway, that's my contribution here.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I'll give you my 2 cents. I love remote working, but I do think that I've done it for years now. But the thing that I think is missing regarding innovation, and you have to be mindful of it, is that spontaneity that is so pervasive when you are co-located with colleagues. And I think there is a conversation about skills to be had as we work more remotely. There are certain skills, and maybe mindfulness, to use a buzzword, and might be one, to know what you're not getting. So thank you so much, and my apologies for going over time. And we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yassi, and all.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. It's wonderful seeing you.
Thank you.